start right off with Timmons Roberts and Energize Rhode Island.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Senators. Thank you all for having us today and considering this legislation. My name is Timmons Roberts. I want to thank Senator Connolly for being the lead sponsor on the Resilient Rhode Island Act that really got this all going 3 years ago. So that's huge. Senator Calkin for introducing this awesome piece of legislation. So I've been working, my name is Timmons Roberts. I'm a professor at Brown University. I'm speaking for myself today. I'm also bringing some students and myself work as sort of technical support for the Energize bill. We've been working on this for 3 years. We have done a lot of research. I've been working on climate change for 25 years. And if anything, the science that we based the Resilient Rhode Island Act on is gotten more extreme. I would very much beg to differ with our earlier statement from Brian, who has unfortunately left. But we'll hear from a geologist from Brown, Tim Herbert, pretty soon, who can brief us on how, the situation. I'm on the EC4's staff, the Scientific and Technical Advisory Board. Maybe not the best acronym. So we're here to staff the EC4. And the idea of that, remember when we talked about the EC4 and the Resilient Rhode Island Act, that it needed to have advisory boards of citizens and then one of scientists to keep the science up to date and say what's happening. So there are substantial impacts. We really don't know when they're coming, but they are coming. Whether the sea level rise of 9 feet comes at the end of this century, as the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration and our CRMC is now saying, or whether it comes later, we still have to start planning for it. Upland flooding, during like the March 2010 flood, Hurricane Sandy, stronger hurricanes, heat waves, rising temperatures, risk to property, infrastructure, farming, and fisheries. Our state's economy and our quality of life is really at stake. Happy to provide more details. The EC4 staff did a PowerPoint at the EC4 meeting. Happy to send that along if that would be useful. I think there's about 12 substantive PowerPoint slides, but you guys don't want to hear that. It's late. So.
Well, great. We'd like to have those.
Yeah, and I want to also mention that this study that you heard about tonight was a major step forward. It identified the technologies that were needed and to get us to meet those targets that were established of 80% emission reductions by 2050. We need all those technologies. However, doing any of that requires incentives, and it requires funding. And so our plan here is this Energize Act collects a fee on carbon emissions in the state, that is the burning of any fossil fuels. It gives 70% of the money right back to people, as Senator Calkin said, in a check to individuals and then also to companies on a per employee basis by FTE. So we're going to hear more about that from some of our experts and coalition members. But it will invest money back in the state. Right now we're spending almost $4 billion a year on fossil fuel energy, of which we produce nothing here. That money is just pouring through our fingers. If we can reduce our waste, then we can create jobs here saving that money. What would this bill do for emissions? Just by putting a price on carbon that's specified in the bill, we would reduce our emissions by about 33%. That would get us about halfway to the emissions reductions that are on the road down, if you look at the modeling. We have commissioned a study that we paid for with a small grant from REMI, the Regional Economic Models. We'll hear more about that in a minute. But that study showed that our emission reductions would get us about halfway there. And that's just with the pricing part of this, without actually the other prices.
Doctor, can you amplify on that 33% reduction? Amplify on that?
So REMI has a complex economic model. I know they're used by state governments and local governments around the country to figure out what's going to happen with, if they, put in a new tax or change a tax or create a new program. So their models estimated also what's going to happen to people's decision making. If there's a price on carbon, right now we all get sort of a free ride when we pollute with carbon. That is, the costs are borne by other people. And nobody, and as a burner of fossil fuel, I don't have to pay. So this would start at, Energize Rhode Island started $15 a ton the first year. So that's about 13.8 cents a gallon of gas or heating oil. So is that a lot? Well, it's not so much. But
That
the hope is that
33%
it's
is the
predictable.
buy-in, the individual buy-in, that you're part of it now, am I
Right.
following that the right
Right,
way?
and at the beginning of the year or at the end of the year, you could get a check for a certain amount of money that you could invest how you want, save money and try to not burn as much fossil fuels. But also it's a price signal, and I think that's what conservatives and, progressives are saying, that this is sending a signal in the least intrusive way. It's setting up putting, more of a price on the carbon so that it's including some of those costs that otherwise we're dumping on everybody else. Even the World Bank and the IMF are pushing countries to take on carbon tax right now. And we saw a group of Republican, sort of the gray backs, or what do they call silverbacks of the Republican Party. The conservative case for carbon dividends, and The Economist magazine anyway, are saying this is the least intrusive way to do this.
Thank you.
So I'm happy to go on with that. And this raising this money, that we set aside 25%, that would give 70% back, put 25% into a clean energy and jobs fund. And that money could be used for weatherization of low-income housing in the state, which is always one of the hardest things to get to, for the people that don't get taken care of. Also to small businesses was where it would start, but it could be used for renewable energy and all kinds of great projects. In fact, the infrastructure bank, created by the support of the Senate Green Jobs Program a couple years ago, or was that just last year? It's been a busy year, and a lot has happened. So that program has a lot of, great parts to it, but they need funding. And so this would generate about $35 or $40 million in the first year that could go into those infrastructure bank projects. Right now, there's only about $6 million that they allotted to that program.
I'm glad you brought up the infrastructure bank. It's an elementary school in my neighborhood, which was one of the first projects for the infrastructure bank. I think it cost about $2 million. There actually is not a renewable component to the program. It's all efficiency. It's all lighting and new retrofitting of how they do their HVAC. Costs about $2 million. They expect to save between $400,000 and $500,000 a year.
So it pays off
And reduce their impact by about their carbon impact by about 30% a year. And I asked them after the program, after we went through the renovations, they were very excited about it because it was one of the first projects. And they prioritize based on savings where these projects go to and efficiency performance. I asked the CEO of the infrastructure bank, who's this brilliant guy that Rhode Island's really fortunate to have, how big would the infrastructure bank be to meet every appropriate project in the state of Rhode Island? And he said about $500 million. And there's a criteria that basically the average criteria is that you have a carbon footprint impact of about 30% as that project has. So imagine funding that to the max and what the impact would be. So whether we could do it through a carbon tax or other programs that have a renewable cycle or a reduction or a fee for carbon that goes into efficiency, I mean, the impact can be tremendous. And these are not unrealistic goals, as I said, our past efforts have shown us.
There are a lot of low-hanging fruit of energy waste sitting out there that we have an infusion of money and good guidance management that could make a huge difference. And these, again, it's creating incentives and you're raising money to make stuff happen. I wanted to just say one word about two more last points. Why Rhode Island needs to lead on climate. Obviously, it's not happening at the federal level. I bring students every year to the United Nations negotiations. Those are fraught. Those are very difficult. I mean, they, of course, came up with an agreement in Paris, which was important, but it's still not getting us there. We're still heading into dangerous territory. And I think, ideally we would have a carbon fee and dividend program at the federal level, but I actually hope that Rhode Island goes there first, because it would allow us to raise this kind of money locally to invest in local projects and keep the money in our local economy. We've seen with Deepwater Wind that, international attention was given to our state for being a leader. Yes, the energy is too expensive. That's another whole question. But we're moving forward, right? We're not going to resolve that one with this bill. we've seen that investors are interested in North American renewable energy markets. They're opening up. Rhode Island was the first on offshore wind, and there's a huge opportunity here. Carbon pricing, if Rhode Island were to pass the first bill, including trigger language that said, all right, we're not actually going to do it until Massachusetts does it, would really send a signal and say, we are here, we're ready to go, and look at our other policies that have been passed in years past. So my last point is about RGGI, right, the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. The question is, why do we need another carbon pricing initiative? We already have RGGI, right? Okay, so RGGI only has auctions for permits for electricity sector. I'm trying not to get too wonky, but it's just electricity, and it's also it fluctuates its price. So when it started at about $3 a ton. That was in September 2008. If you look on their website, that raised $38 million. That was great. It's raised overall, I'm getting ahead of myself, it's raised $2.6 billion. So it's really shown, without destroying the economy of New England, that you can have a carbon pricing system that is good for local initiatives. It's provided a lot of funding that has gone into local stuff in Rhode Island, including, let me see if I have my, $56 million have gone to Rhode Island from RGGI. Here's the problem with RGGI. The price has not gone up. In fact, it went up to about $7, $6 for one or two auctions, and now it's back down at $3.50. That's just, if you adjust for inflation, that's 9 cents more than when it started 9 years ago. So, for $3.50 a ton, would you invest if you're a business person or a homeowner in maybe some expensive retrofitting of your building and putting up renewable energy systems? Probably not. So we need a system that's predictable, right? And this is a predictable system. So another thing is, so there's more about that, but and it's economy-wide. That's the other problem with RGGI is it's just electricity. So if it were to be very effective on the electricity sector, people might switch off their electric heat and just turn on their heating oil furnace, their burners. So there's problems. You push down in one place, it'll pop up somewhere else. So Energize is economy-wide. We'll give you more details on that in future speakers. I just want to say we have a really exciting opportunity here. I hope it will make it through this committee and get to the finance committee so we can really understand the financial impacts. I encourage you to look at the REMI study closely. We will get you hard copies of the full study if you're interested. It's very positive, I would say, in terms of jobs, economic growth. Almost every sector of the economy is going to do well. So happy to answer any questions.
Sure, just probably by way of comment, well, the question, I want to thank you as well, Tim, for all the work that you've done on this and all the group from Energize Rhode Island for all the great work you've done on this, and thanks Senator Calkin for introducing this bill. I think it kind of puts an exclamation point having this bill before us tonight, especially in our first meeting of the session, this early in the session. It really puts an exclamation point on how important this issue is. And having these sort of two different approaches to it really, I think, enhances the discussion and gives people an opportunity to get to know the issue and understand it. So, thank you to Energize Rhode Island for the great work they've done on it. Thank you, Senator, for introducing the bill, and thank you, Madam Chair, for getting them up in front of us tonight right at the beginning of the session. Muchly appreciated.
Thank you. Thank you. I think it's a good way to start. Legislative session.
Thank you. I'll be around and we're available to help with any research needs you have.
Thank you very much.